Hello everyone, my name is Zeph and welcome to the Star Network podcast. Today we have a special guest, Foluso Agbaje, who's the author of The Parlour Wife. Hi Foluso, lovely to have you on the show today.
Hi Zeph, lovely to be here.
Fantastic, I'm glad to have you. Firstly, congratulations on your first novel, The Parlour Wife.
Thank you so much.
And I think it's very incredible that you're a best-selling author for your first novel. How does it actually feel?
It's still very surreal. I really, sometimes I just can't believe it's all happening. But really grateful to be here, really grateful to be at this stage. It's just such a big dream come true and I'm just really grateful for everything.
Great. I'm excited. We're going to dive into everything. But let's start from the beginning. Where did this writing interest actually start from? And I think it's also very critical to note to our audience that for your first novel, you've been published by Harper Collins, which is like one of the big 5 publishers. So that's a huge, success. Well done. But let's go to the beginning of where did this interest come from?
So I feel like this interest has been part of me my whole life. I don't remember a time when I could write that I wasn't writing stories. Like I would write stories in primary school. My first ever story was called Clarissa and the Dog. And I used to illustrate my stories as well. So it was about this girl called Clarissa who had a dog and they'd go on adventures. And I even remember one of the stories, I had a drawing of her like jumping over the fence with her dog. And I was like, wow, yeah, I'm really enjoying this. And I really just enjoy the process of telling people's experiences on paper. My maternal grandmother was a writer as well. I mean, she's still alive, thank God, but she used to write. She doesn't write anymore. My paternal grandfather still writes. He's actually published like 4 novels. So I feel like I was always interested in doing it, but I was fortunate enough to have, instrumental figures in my life who were doing it and showed me that it was something that was attainable and possible to do.
Amazing. And I think I love how you drew that reference to like your childhood and like your grandparents, because I think sometimes when people discover talents within themselves, you simply just need to go back to the history, right? And
Agreed.
How these things pass down generationally. Like I was having a conversation with my mom the other day and we're talking about one of my businesses, my skincare business. And she then said in school, she was also equally very passionate about skincare.
Oh.
Same thing, surprisingly, for my dad. He was like, oh yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, really? So sometimes it's so interesting how like these generational talents kind of like pass down. So that's great to hear. But I think it's also very important for the audience to know that you had a professional 9-to-5 experience before you transitioned. And I think a lot of people...
It's so crazy, but
exactly.
Yes.
A lot of people need to know about this because I think when someone becomes an author, right, it's very important to sort of figure out, would you say your career experience helped you or supported you into that transition? I know you mentioned childhood, but would you say that experience sort of supported you into the transition?
Definitely. So my career background is in HR and consulting. I have about 11 years experience in HR and consulting. And I think that, my experience in corporate was really what set me up to be the author that I am now. So first of all, in HR, having to have the empathy that you need to be a good HR person really helped me understand people's stories, their ambitions, their challenges, their motivations, the things that really, got to them. And I think to be a good author, you have to be able to capture every part of your characters. There's some characters that are not likable, but you need to be able to understand their motives and why they are the way they are. And I think just having that empathy in my day-to-day job in HR really helped me to write characters that were well-rounded. Another thing is the discipline and the structure that corporate just gives you, like working towards deadlines, working towards goals. Writing is creative, yes, but I think to do it properly and to do it well and to do it the way I'm trying to do it is you have to be very detail-oriented and you need to have a structure in place and you need to be disciplined. You can't say you're not going to write today because you don't feel like writing. Well, then it means you're not really trying to have a successful career out of it. And I think that structure that having a 9-to-5 gave me has been really instrumental. I mean, I was writing when I was working 9-to-5, so I would have to find the time every day to do the writing, and it was just so helpful. And I think lastly, as a business leader, resilience is something that I really learned working in corporate. I mean, there's so many times we would submit proposals in consulting for deals that we really wanted to get. We would be fundraising in other industries I worked in, and you get told no so many times, but you can't give up because that's what your business is there for. And that's your business has to survive. And that resilience in publishing, I got so many no's before I got the yes. And at some point, it just felt like, is this ever going to happen? But having that resilience from working in corporate really helped me just kind of see it through.
Amazing. No, thank you for identifying like the struggle, because I think, when you see someone has been successful at something, it's very easy to just see the glamour. But I love that you actually said, look, transparently, you went through a couple of no's.
I got so many no's.
People rejected you.
Oh gosh, so many times.
But now Foluso is an author, and what we see online is, oh my God, like she's been published by Harper Collins, but there is a huge process to getting to where you are today. So I like that you've been very transparent about that. And I think whenever people want to go into entrepreneurship or, do a startup, they actually sort of despise the corporate environment that they're currently in. So whether it's you feel frustrated or you have a toxic boss or things are not panning out the way that you want it to be, I always say to myself, no experience is ever a waste, right? Like every single experience in the corporate world shapes you to become that future leader or that, owner of a key startup, right? It's the experiences, it's the discipline, it's learning teamwork. And it's what you said about writing, right? Being in human resources and connecting with people, like you said, I think it's a huge thing to like storytelling, because you are the resource manager, you work with people. So people talent, identifying people's emotions, how do you balance this in a corporate life? And then sort of using that same talent and creativity to then put it pen to paper, I think is brilliant. And I think someone who's listening that wants to probably become an author and is trying to think, I really don't know where to begin, do not despise your corporate environment. But
it helps a lot.
It does help.
It
but
helps.
Your title, I found very interesting, right? The Parlour Wife. And when I saw it, the first thing that came to my mind, I was like, okay, obviously this is about Nigeria, because in Nigeria we say Parlour. And the Parlour.
I feel like nobody else says Parlour. It's a Nigerian word.
Exactly, it's a Nigerian word. But then I don't know whether it's also like dated back to like, I don't know, colonial times with like England. Maybe they actually said Parlour. I don't know.
And we've held on to it.
Maybe we've just held on to it. And it's a colonial thing. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, cool. It's a Nigerian story. I like that. But when I saw the title, what stuck out for me was why this title in particular, and how would you say that this title is relevant to the Nigeria of today, especially being a Nigerian woman. So when I see Parlour Wife, the first thing that comes to my mind is a woman that is just sat at home and is being told what to do. How do you draw that relevance to Nigeria of today, where it's like marriage and children, but you want to be a career-driven person?
So the title came from a story my paternal grandfather told me. And this was really what sparked the idea for the book. And he was talking about his uncle, who was in 1940s at some point, who had a new wife. And apparently this wife was beautiful. I mean, my grandpa was a child when he met her. And he was describing her. She was so beautiful. And, but he said to her, or apparently he said to everybody that this wife is for the Parlour, Iyawo Parlour. So Iyawo is wife in Yoruba. And he was like, he doesn't want her in the kitchen. He doesn't want her doing any kind of chores. He just wants her sitting pretty every day in the parlour. And her job as his wife was just to be taking care of guests and just, be beautiful, be here, almost like an ornament in the parlour. And I thought it's so interesting because I wonder what that wife was thinking. Like, did she want to do that? Fine, fair enough if that's what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
But like, I just started wondering, what did she actually want to do with her life? Would she have been, rather have been somewhere else? And that's what sparked the idea for the book. I started thinking, what were women in Nigeria doing in the 1940s? Like, what was going on at that point in time? What was happening? And what reality did she have that she was maybe fighting against or, really leaning into? And there's actually a part of the book in the beginning that I'd like to read from, because I feel like Kende's journey really starts with those questions.
Yes.
So just to set the scene, Kende and her dad are on a boat, and it's the very first chapter. So I promise I'm not dropping any spoilers. Kende nodded as they steered their boats towards the jetty. Her mother had reminded them to come back in time to start cooking for the party. And now hours had gone by. The morning sun sat in the sky, with dark clouds beginning to gather around them. She was looking forward to getting home before the inevitable rain started. Unlike the calm of the ocean, the wetness falling from the sky had never felt right on her skin. I invited Mr. Ogunjobi to come to the house later, her father continued, the wind almost drowning out his words. Kende felt her heart sink into her stomach faster than a rock dropped into the depths of the water around them. They had invited a handful of family friends and neighbors to their house to celebrate her and Taiwo's 18th birthday in the evening, and from their mother's frantic preparations, she had suspected that Mr. Ogunjobi would be there. Daddy, please, I don't want to marry him. I got a job at the West African Pilot, Kende said. What job? Her father asked, frowning. He had not yet accepted Mr. Ogunjobi's marriage proposal, but Kende knew that he and her mother thought it was the best way to secure all their futures, especially as they had no idea that she had her own completely different plans. She thought about the way the letter had felt in her hand yesterday, the answer to her prayers, salvation from Mr. Ogunjobi. She finally had what she wanted most, an invitation to meet the editor to discuss her offer to join the West African Pilot, the newest newspaper in Nigeria. I submitted an opinion piece to the editor and he loved it. He wants me to write a column for the female readers. Daddy, please, I might never get this chance again, Kende replied, sitting higher in the boat. Her father paused as he looked at her. The look on his face was one of pride and something else Kende couldn't decipher. Fear, maybe? He had always told her and Taiwo that they were born to do great things, and it had been her guiding principle all her life. But how could she do great things when she would much rather spend the day alone with a book than having to talk to people? In the last year of not being in school, one day she had realized her life had no purpose. Kende had been listening to one of her mother's regular customers, who wasn't much older than she was, talk about how she was moving to Abeokuta to expand her raffia mat trade. While she joined her mother to congratulate the girl, it wasn't lost on Kende that she had nothing she was working towards. No real plans, despite the longing to do something meaningful with her life. How many more days, months, years even, would she continue to be just peaceful, quiet Kende, the daughter of the fisherman, the dutiful child that helped with the family business? She wanted so much more, a way to stop the reserved twin, the wallflower, the one who cared more about what other people thought than her own ideas. Then a month ago, Taiwo had seen the job ad for the West African Pilots on a flyer on his way to school. It was perfect, a job that would give her life more meaning, one where she could get away with barely having to speak to anyone. Writing gave her a voice, a way to articulate the thoughts she was always too afraid to say aloud. Getting married was the last thing she felt like doing now that she had finally found a way to give her life more meaning, especially not to Mr. Ogunjobi. It wasn't bad enough that he already had 2 wives. He was older than her father. Keke, war could be declared any day now. That's exactly why I should be accepting this job. Kende, as an older person, he started, quoting one of his favorite proverbs in the preacher tone that Kende and Taiwo had heard so many times over the years. Sitting down, I can see what you cannot see standing up. This isn't the time to be a political activist. War will change everything. Better to be settled and married, not doing an untested job. Kende felt indignation welling up from deep within her. It always seemed like because she was a girl, her choices were to be made by someone else. First her parents, then her husband, then the ultimate decision maker in the chain of command.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. So I feel like that really kind of captured Kende's inner turmoil, where she wanted to be a writer for the West African Pilots, and she had, gone and secretly applied for this job with the help of her twin brother. And her dad was telling her, no, actually, war's about to be declared. You need to get married. It's not time to be running off trying to do some kind of untested job. And I feel like the parallel with us women today is, yes, we're so lucky that we are able to do the kind of jobs that we want to do. But it's also almost seen that if you're not married or you're not a mom, your success is incomplete.
Correct.
In some way. And I remember somebody, I think it was on Instagram a few years ago, someone was talking about how we should learn to celebrate our friends' successes the way we celebrate their weddings. Like you hear about someone getting married and all of their friends are so excited and they're throwing, the bridal shower for them, but they get a new job and everyone's just like, okay, cool. Like that's fine. And that's not to negate any success or make anyone seem smaller than the other. It's just to say that as a woman, we're not one-dimensional. We're not just meant to do one thing. There's so many areas in our lives that can be areas for success, and we should learn to celebrate all of them. And, leaning into that idea is, I think, a more fulfilling way to live than leaning into the idea that society has of you, which is ultimately
just to be a wife, and to be married.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I completely agree. And I think for me, when I said that her heart sunk, for me, it kind of reminded me when you're like a child and you really want something and you get a refusal, right? But it was the fact that being a woman in that time, she felt like she had no choice. Now, if you want to do something as a woman, the reality is whether you get a no, you're going to still end up doing whatever it is that you want, right? You'll find an alternative. We have options. But what I also find interesting is how you are able to draw like a parallel emotion to a war that was happening in the global West, World War II, which was very specific. And I thought, what made Foluso think of World War II? Because when you hear of war, you don't really link how it has an impact on the country that has been colonized, right? I would never think, oh my God, what was happening in Nigeria at the time? It's just World War II. You're thinking about what's happening in France, in Britain, and all
Germany,
the different
America.
alliances, exactly how they were expanding territory and trying to capture, was it the year of the superpower? I don't know, I can't remember. But you never really think about Nigeria, but how you were able to factor in the lives of these Nigerians and their emotions. So a war is coming, I need to marry to be safe. I'm not going to be able to explore being a writer. It's very specific. And I want to know why you selected war and how it had an impact on the emotions.
I love historical fiction. Reading is, I think writing is very hard. And I don't know, it's really hard to write historical fiction. I would say that to anybody who's interested in becoming a writer. But I enjoy reading historical fiction and watching period dramas. Love.
I saw that you like Downton Abbey.
Oh gosh, please,
let's not start.
Let's not
start it. I watched it again recently and I was like, this is actually the
I watched
best
it
show.
too many times. Like I could probably speak along with him on the TV. So I really love historical fiction. And I went through a phase in my life, probably when I was a teenager, when I was obsessed with World War II. So I would read everything I could find about World War II. And in my 20s, I started thinking, okay, what was happening in Nigeria at that point in time? Like, Nigeria was definitely a country at that point in time. Nigeria was a colony of the British Empire, and the British Empire was very much involved in the Second World War. And I started just wondering, like, okay, so what was happening? And I found that I just really couldn't find much. I couldn't find much in terms of fiction and nonfiction. I mean, there's stuff out there, but I had to really look for it. So luckily for me, my grandparents are still alive, and they were children at the time. They were children in the 1940s. And I remember speaking to my paternal grandparents and asking, what was it like for you during World War II? Like, what was happening? And my grandma mentioned being on a ration queue with her siblings. And I was like, Grandma, I don't understand. Ration queues in Nigeria, in Lagos. Yeah. And she's like, yes, in Lagos Island, they were like, where she lived, that they had to wake up early to join the ration queues. And you read so much about ration queues in the
England.
UK.
You never hear that about
you don't hear about that in
Nigeria.
Nigeria. But it then just really brought home to me that Nigeria was very much a part of the war, because we were a colony of the British Empire, and so many of our soldiers went off to fight for the war. So Taiwo, who's Kennedy's brother, goes off to fight for the war. And not just, soldiers going to fight. Our resources were also very heavily exploited in terms of being sent across the Allies to contribute to the war efforts. And that's just not, it's very much, you don't really hear about it in our history, and it's overlooked generally. So I really wanted to talk about that, and I really wanted to write about that. Something else I tried to explore was this idea of intersectional feminism, because even at the time in World War II, women in the UK were fighting more for equality, because they were picking up the kind of jobs that men had left behind because they had gone to the war. In Nigeria, it was a different battle. The women were fighting against colonial exploitation, because I go into this in the book where we're talking about women in the markets having to be taxed to contribute to the overall war efforts. And I just wanted to touch on that as well. The idea that history just touches all of us across the world in so many different ways.
Different ways, yes. Yeah. And I really love that you did that, because I feel like it does spark a curiosity to what was happening. And like you said, you don't really hear about the impacts on like the colonies, right? And now this is such an opportunity for people to actually do more research. What was happening in Nigeria? What was happening with our trade? What was happening with our men and our resources? It's like those things are being left out. But what I'm learning is we are really the author of like telling our stories. No one is going to do it for us. Like, I can imagine there's so much like historical data that is being left out or just wasn't like put into context when it comes to like African countries. And now that responsibility is truly on us to like sell story and to archive. And you who is creating like fictional is it drama? But like a fictional novel.
I guess drama anyway.
I guess it's drama. A fictional novel in reference to the war will actually make someone be interested and to do the necessary research. But let's speak about resiliency, right? You did mention being resilient is very critical. So you said you got so many no's, and I want to talk about that, because it's interesting you got no's, but then your yes was from a huge, important publisher, right? Tell us about that journey, because I saw that you went to Faber Academy, etc. Was going to that academy what supported you to then secure the publishing with Harper Collins, or was that a completely different path on its own?
Tell us completely about that different. So that Faber Academy experience was fantastic, because I had gone from being an informal writer my whole life to actually getting the skills I needed to write? Like, where do I start? Where do I even begin to reach out to agents or publishers? So I did the Faber Academy course in 2021. I finished it in 2022, and that's when I really started looking for an agent. I wouldn't say you need to do a course, to be a published author. It just really helped me because it made it so much easier for me to understand how to dive into that publishing world. Like we mentioned earlier, I've always been in corporate, so this was completely new to me. So that was probably the easiest part, doing the course. It was hard to get into the course, but it was easier to do the course than to get an agent and to get a publisher. There's a process called querying, like QUERYING, and it's like looking for a job where you're looking for an agent. And I had to draw up a list of my top 40 agents, and I knew I wanted an agent in the UK because the UK is probably one of the biggest homes for publishing around the world. So I had to draw up a list of my top 40. And this is where the structure and discipline from working in corporate really helped, because there was a whole Excel spreadsheet. I had different tabs. I had cells where I would say, okay, this is what this agent likes. This is what I should put in my submission package. But that process is also very, very hard because I got so many no's again. And that was just to get an agent. So finally, I got an agent. And then the agent then takes on that submission process for you to go to publishers. And then every 2 weeks, they'll send you a list, with the summary saying, send it out to this publisher. They said this, they said that. So there were so many, I liked the book, but I didn't like it enough to pick it up. Or I really liked the book. I took it to an acquisitions meeting, but we couldn't, take it forward. Or I have so much historical fiction on my list, so I can't take this on this year. There were so many different types of no's that I mentioned. I finished the Faber course in 2022. By beginning of 2023, I still had no publishing deal. And I was just thinking, okay, maybe this is, this dream might not be coming true. Maybe this is not for me. But it just goes to show you should never give up. And you just don't know when the time is going to come. And just keep pushing. Because thankfully my agent is very supportive and she kept going out on submission. And then one day she sent me a message on WhatsApp and she was like, can you speak? And to show you how much I had just given up on the idea it was going to happen, I was like, oh yeah, let's talk later today. I'm free in the evening. And she's like, no, can you talk now? And I was like, okay, I guess. If we must talk now. I think I was in between meetings at work. And then she called and she's like, we have an offer. And I just remember screaming on the phone, oh my gosh, because it was something that it just felt so out. It felt so out of reach. It felt like I've tried everything I can, and maybe, maybe this is just not going to happen for me. So I'm, like I said, really grateful to the Faber course as well. It was really helpful. It just helped me understand what to do and how to go about it.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's very easy to give up your dreams. And I think, the last time that we saw, and you said you have transitioned to become an author, this is what you do full time now. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Scary, but very interesting. And what I find particularly interesting is that a lot of people are leaving Nigeria, right? A lot of young people for high economic opportunities, and that's fair enough. And sometimes I do worry that this brain drain is just costing our country so much, right? Of brilliant minds, whether it's the next author, the next huge startup, the next health tech, whatever it is, right? And it's interesting that in your case, you decided to become an author, but you're still here. And I want to speak about that because what was your motivation to decide this is going to work? I know you did say it was tough, you had to be resilient, but how did you how were you able to analyze in your mind that this is the career path to go and it's going to work and I'm going to stay in Nigeria? Because it's very easy for you to join that brain drain wagon and say, I want to become an author, there are no prospects here, I'm going to leave. But look at it now, you're here in Nigeria, you've been published by Harper Collins, and I keep repeating it because it does carry a lot of weight. And just to encourage people that it 100% is possible. So how are you able to weigh that up?
I think the good thing about being an author is that, it's you on your laptop. You could be anywhere in the world, right? And I'm so grateful for my life. Most of my life I've lived in Nigeria. It's been really helpful to have those experiences. Most of my friends are Nigerian, most of my family is Nigerian. So having that perspective it makes it easier to write Nigerian stories. But on the bright side, being an author, I could be anywhere in the world. I would say, though, that on the brain drain, the issue of the brain drain, it's definitely worrying. But there are many people who want to move to Nigeria. There are many Nigerians around the world who, if they could find a good job or good opportunities or make things work, they would actually be in Nigeria if they could. And I think it's up to our industries and our governments, the companies that are in Nigeria to make it attractive for people to come back. So things like having competitive benefits, having a strong employer brand, making sure you have the right culture. These are the kind of things that encourage people to actually come back and take the opportunities. Even with flexible working, like, having some kind of arrangements where your employees don't have to be here all the time. We've seen that during the pandemic, people can still do their work without actually physically being in an office. So I feel like we, as a country, need to start exploring these options because, like you, I do worry that the brain drain is a lot and really affecting a lot of industries.
Yeah, correct. And I like that you said that because one of the questions I was then going to bring up is talent management or like talent retainer. But like you said, how can companies be more competitive? How can you make things attractive to people? And I would use Christmas as an example, right? I feel like December is such a heavy period for Nigeria, right? But for whatever reason, it just kind of felt like there was so much overemphasis on last Christmas, December 26th. And I'm wondering why, right? I'm really wondering why. Because for me as a Nigerian, I'm like, yeah, but isn't it always like this? But it did feel like there was such an inflow. And I think now with the way that the world is moving, people are starting to find opportunity. So you find a lot of people then saying, oh, I've converted my home to like an Airbnb because I want to accommodate like the influx of people coming in. People are now going into like real estate. People are creating like new businesses just to support Christmas. I bet you people are even planning now for December of 2025 because there's such a huge influx. So correct, people are leaving. But once we just master as people and as companies, what can we do to bring in people? I think it'll be great. And we'll see like a huge array of talent. So I'm happy that you're on this journey. I think it's exciting. I think it's encouraging for someone who wants to take a similar career path and maybe they're just looking down on it. They don't really know where to begin or they don't think that they are worthy enough to do it. Your story is that it actually is very possible. And guys, you can reach out to Foluso. So I usually
reach out to me.
I usually end my podcast saying, what is your favorite quiz and why? But I think in your case, I'm going to change it. What would you say has been the most challenging thing on this journey or the scariest thing for you on this journey, and how are you able to overcome it, or how are you overcoming it?
That's definitely an ongoing effort at overcoming. So I think it definitely has been overcoming self-doubt because it's quite scary. I've gone from being in corporate for close to 12 years to being a debut author. I'm learning new things every day. I'm now a beginner. It feels like being at the beginning of a career. And I feel like, yes, there's been so much encouragement and I'm so grateful for where I am now. But there's always that voice inside, the self-doubts, where I'm always asking myself, like, what are you doing? How are you going to achieve the next thing? But just, trying to remember to be calm and trust the process. And just, remembering to overcome the self-doubts when it comes and staying positive, leaning into support. I would say that, being an author, you need to try and lean into as much help as you can get. There's so many free resources. So you don't have to pay to do a course like the Faber course. You could go on YouTube and see so many free resources. There's probably someone in your network that is an author and can give you advice. So I'm also just leaning into that in terms of community support as well.
Felicia, thank you. It's been so great having you. And
thank you.
Yeah, I think it was a long time coming because every time we'd run into each other, we're like, oh yeah, we're going to schedule this podcast. We need to have the conversation. But I'm glad. And I think the audience has learned so much. I think someone will be 100% encouraged. And guys, if you haven't gotten the Parlour Wife, you can find it on Roven Heights on Masobe bookstores. Just Google it and it'll pop up. But yes, if you want to learn more about Felicia, you can follow her on social media handles. You've learned about being a business leader, what it is to transition from your 9-to-5 to, I would say, entrepreneurship, but essentially just going after your dreams. If you want to learn more, follow Foluso on her handle at Foluso. What's your handle?
Agbaje on Instagram, Agbaje on Twitter. It's very generic on everything, really. If you search Agbaje, you'll find
Foluso. So that's it for now, guys. And until next time, don't forget to stay tuned for more guests that are coming on the show. Follow us on our social media handles at The Star Network Pod, and feel free to email us for any partnerships. And until next time, bye.